Okay, a great day again. Let's continue with item number 31. Supposing if A is the matrix 8, 4, -1, and 3, and A sub A raised to T represents the transpose of A, what is A multiplied by its transpose? So we have to remember that matrix multiplication is not commutative. So in this case, we will multiply it with its transpose. And when we speak about transpose of a matrix, of a square matrix, all you have to do is interchange the the column with the row. So the transpose from the row, it becomes a column, and from the column, it becomes the row. So for this case, if this is A, then its transpose is 8, 4, -1, 3. So you see, the first row becomes the first column, and the second row becomes the second column of its transpose. And by multiplying them, we can arrive to this. That is 8 times 8 plus 4 times 4. That would be here. Next, for the entries of the first column, for this part here, for the first row, second column, that's 8 times -1 plus 4 times -3. Then, for the entries of the second row, first column, -1 times 8 plus 3 times 4. And lastly, for the second column, second row, that would be -1 times -1 plus 3 times 3. And in simplifying each, you will arrive to 64 plus 16, -8 plus 12, -8 plus 12, and 1 plus 9. And in this case, this simplifies to 84, 4, 10. Hence, the correct answer here is letter A. I hope you got letter A correctly. 32. Is the set of non-zero real numbers a group under ordinary multiplication? Is it yes, no, both yes or no, or cannot be determined? And when we speak about a group, it should satisfy 4 properties. The first property of a group is that there's closure. When we speak about closure property, if you operate on any 2 elements within the set, then the answer should also be found within the set as well. So, for example, if you have any 2 non-zero real numbers, and if you multiply them, the answer will still be another real number. So closure is there. The next property is associativity. And we all know, hopefully, that ordinary multiplication of rational numbers is associative. So no problem with associativity. Next is the existence of an identity element. We know that the identity element of multiplication is 1. And since 1 is also a real number, therefore, we could say that this particular property, it is satisfied. And lastly, inverse property is also satisfied. Why? Because when we speak about inverse property of multiplication, we know that the inverse of a number under ordinary multiplication is its reciprocal. And all non-zero real numbers have reciprocals. Therefore, the inverse property is satisfied. And remember this, if it satisfies all 4 properties, then it is a group. But if there is at least 1 property that is not satisfied, then it is not a group. So clearly, this is a group, and letter A is the correct answer. 33. What is the inverse of 3 under ordinary addition in the set of natural numbers? Is it -3, 0.333, 3, or not? What is your answer here? For this question, Remember, if we are talking about ordinary addition, the inverse of 3, we are talking about the additive inverse, which is -3. But however, the answer here is not letter A, but none. Why is that so? Sir, I thought it's -3. But actually, the answer here is none. Why? Because we are talking about the set of natural numbers. However, negative integers is not, a negative integer is not a natural number, and hence -3 is not an element of natural numbers. And so it has no inverse in the set of natural numbers as well. Hence, the correct answer here is letter D. All right. Moving on. Which of the following is a subgroup of U, asterisk, where U is a set of elements, -1, 1, I, -I, and asterisk is ordinary multiplication. Note that in this case, I is equal to the square root of -1, and that I squared is -1. So, we all know that it should satisfy all the 4 properties of a group. And we are talking about multiplication here. And we could see that A and options A and B do not have the identity element, which is 1. Therefore, remember that identity element is also a property of a group. And with this fact that it does not satisfy that property alone, then A and B can never be groups or subgroups. Let's talk about letter D, option D. If you have 1, -1, you could see it's close. If you multiply any 2 elements, 1 times 1, it's 1. So it's here. So there's closure. -1 times -1, it's still 1, which is here. 1 times -1, it's -1. So whatever 2 elements you operate under ordinary multiplication, the answer is still within the set. So closure is satisfied. Associativity, ordinary multiplication is associative. There is an identity element, which is 1. And there is also an inverse for each one. In fact, the inverse of 1 is itself. 1 times 1 is 1. And -1 times -1 is 1. Because when we speak about inverse property, there should be, if you operate, there should be at least, there should be an element that could be operated with within the set, such that the answer is the identity element. So it satisfies all of these 4 properties. So 1, -1 is a group, and being a group in this case, and it has fewer elements in this case, it is also a subgroup of U. Note that letter C option is not a group for this reason. And I'll give you an example. If it does not satisfy closure, example, I times I times I will be I squared, which is -1. And clearly, -1 is not an element of set C. So here, it already violates closure property. That's why D is the correct answer here. Letter number 35. What is the derivative of sine squared x plus cosine squared x, where x is an angle? Is it sine 2x, cosine 2x, 1, or 0? If you could still recall your trigonometry, one of your trigonometric identities, we all know that you could recall that sine squared x plus cosine squared x equals 1. And since they form an equality, and if you take the derivative of both sides, their derivatives will also be equal to one another. But we know that the derivative of 1 is 0 because the derivative of any constant is 0. That's why we could say that the derivative of sine squared x plus cosine squared x equals 0, and that would be letter C. If you use the chain rule, no problem. You will arrive to 2 sine x cosine x, and this one will be 2 negative 2 cos x sine x. So they will become 0 as well. But that's another way. In this case, I just use the shorter way. 36. Which of the following is the slope of the function y equals 2x squared plus sine 3x? The slope of any curve or function is in fact its first derivative. So we will be taking the derivative of y equals 2x squared plus sine 3x. Now, for 2x squared plus 3 sine 3x, we will use the power rule for 2x squared. Here it's 4x, but for the sine 3x, we will be using the chain rule. The derivative of sine is cosine, so we have here cosine 3x. But 3x here is another function, so we have to take its derivative, which is 3. And rearranging the terms, we have the slope, which is equal to dy over dx equals 4x plus 3 cosine 3x. Okay. Fast track to 37. Letter A is the answer here. 37. Which of the following is the correct derivative of y equals 1 over 3x cubed? Is it A, B, C, or D? So what others do here is that they use the quotient rule, but that's okay, no problem with that. But actually, the power rule here is also applicable. How come? 3x cubed, the x cubed in the denominator could go in our numerator. So, and the sign of the exponent will become negative. So you have y equals x raised to negative 3 over 3. And we can now use the power rule. So for the numerator, the negative 3 will go in the front part. So negative 3, x raised to, subtract the exponent by negative 1, x raised to negative 4 all over 3. We could see that negative 3 over 3 will be negative 1. But the x raised to negative 4 in the numerator, by using the laws of algebra, will become x raised to 4 in the denominator part. Hence, the correct answer here is negative 1 over x to the 4th power. And if you answer D, great job. Now, 38. I hope you're having a great time so far, and I hope you're having pretty good scores. 38. A rock is thrown into a still pond and causes a circular ripple. If the radius of the ripple is increasing at 2 feet per second, how fast in feet per second is the area changing when the radius is 10 feet? So is it 25, 25 pi, 30 pi, or 40 pi? What do you think? So here, if we are talking about how fast, we are talking about rates here. So this is a related rates problem. And in related rates problems, we need to get the derivatives. So a good way here could be by drawing, no? So if you drop a pebble or if you throw a pebble into the water, then if you could see from this small point here, small circles gradually becoming larger appear in the water. And remember that the radius is growing by 2 feet per second, and that is your dr over dt, or the rate at which your radius grows with respect to time. That is why, but before I go into that, we know that area of a square, of a circle rather, is pi r squared. Taking the derivative of both sides with respect to time, we have this one, ddt of a equals the ddt of pi r squared. So getting the derivative of the left-hand side, that would be dA over dt equals the derivative of pi r squared. You will be using the power rule here. So you will multiply this 2 with pi, which is a constant. So that would be 2 pi r, pi times 2r. And the exponent, remember, will be subtracted by 1. And of course, the derivative of r with respect to t is dr over dt. And for the next one, What's important here is that you understand the problem. And remember that the radius is growing by 2 feet per second. That's our dr over dt. That is why the dr over dt is 2. And when the radius is 10, then we could now solve for dA over dt. And with such, by substitution, that's dA over dt equals pi times 2 times 10 times 2, which is 40 pi. Hence, we could say, therefore, at the moment, when the radius is 10 feet, the area of the circle is growing at the rate of 40 pi. In this case, no, it's 40 pi square feet per second. Okay, that 126 there actually is the approximation only, but it's better if we use really the exact value, which is 40 pi per square feet, which is letter D. And as expected, the sign of our dA over dt is positive, because we have to remember how come dA over dt is positive, because the area grows. Because if the area or if the sign here is negative, meaning to say it shrinks, which contradicts known information. Okay, so I hope you got it right. Letter D is the correct answer here. Next, at what value of x is the slope of y equals 1/3 x cubed minus 5/2 x squared plus 6x plus 1 neither increasing nor decreasing? Is it 2 and 3, negative 3 and negative 2, negative 2 and 3, or negative 3 and 2? What do you think is the correct answer here? So to solve this problem, all we have to do is remember that the slope of any function or relation is in fact its slope. I mean, the slope is its derivative, the first derivative to be exact. And since it's neither increasing nor decreasing, then the slope has to be 0. So what we have to do here is that we will solve for the first derivative of this function, which is f prime of x, which is x squared minus 5x plus 6 using your power rule. And as what I said earlier, neither increasing nor decreasing is telling us that the derivative, the value of your first derivative or slope is 0. So 0 equals x squared minus 5x plus 6. And you could see here that we can solve this by factoring. X squared minus 5x plus 6 is factorable into x minus 2 times x minus 3 equals 0. And by the 0 property of multiplication, you equate each of these factors to 0, and you will get 2 and 3. Hence, f of x, or your function there, is neither increasing nor decreasing when x is 2 or is 3. And that is letter A. Okay, so I hope you got it right as well. Let us move on to item number 40. Find d squared y all over dx squared. You might be confused of this notation, but this simply means the second derivative. If y is equal to the product of 2x minus 3 and 4x plus 3. So there are many ways of doing this. What others do is that they multiply the two binomials first and to come up with a trinomial. And after coming up with a trinomial, they get the first derivative, then second derivative. No problem with that. But in my case here, for now, I will be utilizing the product rule. And the product rule is, if you have the product of two functions, for example, all you have to do is, it's the first function, you copy the first function, 2x minus 3, and multiply it with the derivative of the second function. The second function here is 4x plus 3, its derivative is 4. That's why I have here 4 multiplied to 2x minus 3. Also, plus the second function, you copy the 4x plus 3, and you multiply it with the derivative of the first function. The derivative of 2x minus 3 is 2, so we have here 2. And by distribution, we arrived to this, to 8x minus 12 plus 8x plus 6, and the first derivative is 16x minus 6. But this is not yet the final answer because we need to look for the second derivative. And what's the derivative of, when we say second derivative, it is the derivative of the first derivative. So the derivative of 16x is 16, and the derivative of negative 6 is 0, because the derivative of any constant is 0. Hence, if you answered letter C, 16, then you should be happy because you got it right.